Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Friday Night Magic Spotlight. For this week, I'm going to kind of switch things up. I'm not actually showing you a deck tick here. I'm actually showing you what I would consider the Tier 1 decks out of Frontier. We have a little bit of data. This is still nothing compared to like after a format has really had a lot of big name tournaments like Grand Prix and Pro Tours and things like that. So the Frontier metagame is still pretty much wide open, but we are starting to see a lot of patterns with especially people going back to what is familiar. So what I mean by that is going back to standard decks that were good in their standard time and then trying to upgrade them with cards out of the newer sets that have come out since those decks have rotated. So for this week, I'm going to do a two-part series. This first video is going to show you ways to sideboard against the top tier 1 decks in Frontier. And then the second part, or the second video I'm going to release today, is actually going to be about upgrading current standard decks and getting them ready for Frontier. That's one of the biggest complaints, or not really complaints, but hesitations that I have with new players trying to enter the Frontiers. Are like, well, I don't know what to do, what deck to build. And the simple answer is, well, maybe you should just try to look at your standard deck and play it in Frontier, because it's actually quite viable. And I'll show you some decks that are easy to upgrade to make them ready to go for Frontier. So for this series, though, we're going to go over the top 5 decks. I've picked these out. Of course, it could be open to interpretation. Some of these have a little bit of overlap with other archetypes. So the first one the decks I've chosen for this episode are going to be Atarka Red, Jeskai Black, Abzan Aggro, Ensoul Aggro, and Rally the Ancestors. So it's got 3 aggro decks that try to be aggressive in 3 different fashions. One's an all-in with the Ensoul Aggro. Abzan Aggro is one of the more progressive aggro decks, where it starts off with a 1-drop, then a 2-drop, then a 3-drop, and then a 4-drop, and then follows it up with Premier Removal, and then it even has some Planeswalkers in the mix. Atarka Red is a go-wide strategy. Atarka Red tries to put out multiple tokens and then win off of either burn through lightning strikes and stoke the flames and wild slashes to kind of support the aggressive cards. Or it tries to get a target's command with like a Hordling Outburst out or a Reckless Bushwhacker, and that is a ton of damage. So there's different ways to build a Atarka Red, but I've got one shown here on the screen. The Ensoul Aggro tries to kind of go all in on an Ensoul artifact that also has cards like Smash, or not Smash Smithereens, we'll look at it. The 5 damage, sacrifice an artifact. And then we have the one combo deck that's really big in the format, which is Rally Ancestors, and then the big control deck, which is Jeskai Black, or 4-color control is what they call it nowadays. So first of all, we'll start off with Atarka Red. So let me explain for all of you people that may be new to this kind of format. This is a very, very popular deck during Khans of Tarkir. Well, when Dragons first came out with the fetch lands and Atarka's command, it really allowed for a very, very aggressive, one of the most aggressive red decks we've seen in a long time. And this utilized the Atarka's command with tokens such as Hordling Outburst and Dragon Fodder. It also had access to, this particular one doesn't look like it has the, yes it does. This has Goblin Rabble Masters in here. So if the Goblin Rabble Master survives for 2 turns, then Atarka's command can actually instant speed, give all the goblins +1/+1, and when you've done a lot of damage early with cards like Lightning Berserker and Zergo Bellstriker, and of course the Monstrous Swift Spear, something like a 3rd turn and then a 4th turn swing in with either Hordling Outburst or Goblin Rabble Master can often be lethal with the Atarka's command. So this particular version is kind of done. The only upgrades that it's done is put in the Smuggler's Copter. So that's it. It's pretty much the same deck that existed back in the day. The mana too, the mana is the exact same. So they run like a 1 of Become Immense. Sometimes I've seen like a 1 of Teamer Battle Rage in the deck, because on a Swift Spear that can get quite lethal. So anywho, ways to sideboard effectively against Atarka Red. So I think the first one, if you're in white, a card that does really well against this type of strategy was printed in Kaladesh, which I'm pretty excited to play in Frontier because it's just not very good against vehicles in Standard, which is Authority of the Consuls. Authority of the Consuls is creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. It does very well against the Reckless Bushwhacker strategy of this, and it makes the Hordeling Outburst gain you 3 life, the Dragon Fodders gain you 2 life, even the Swift Spears come into play tapped, the Zergu Bellstrike can't dash in, the Lightning Berserker can't dash in as well, and it gives you that progressive life gain. Every time your opponent tries to play a card, it's going to give you life, and they're trying to do tick by tick, take you down. They can burst you down in one big swing, if they are running the Become Immense and Temur Battle Rage combo, but for the go wide portion of this, the Authority of the Consuls is incredibly good at shutting down this deck. So if you're in white, I really do think that Authority of the Consuls needs to be in your sideboard, especially for a Atarka Red. Another good card, now that we're in black, is going to be Collective Brutality. I think this is one of the best cards in the format. Is it Collective? There we go. Collective Brutality. Collective Brutality is a 2 mana, and it says target creature has -2 and -2, and target opponent reveals his or her hand, choose an instant sorcery card, and they exile it or discard it, and then the other mode is target opponent loses 2 life and gain 2 life. This is the perfect answer to a deck that's trying to tick you down, so it can basically counter a wild slash damage if that's, that's a thing, or at least gaining 2 life is the difference between often winning and losing against this matchup on like turn 4 or turn 5. So the best thing about it, though, is it takes care of that early Lightning Berserker or Zergu Bellstriker, and you have to be a little bit careful with Monastery Swift Spear, but if they're tapped out, you can easily just kill the Monastery Swift Spear or the Abbot of Carol Keep. So it does a great job of taking care of those early cards that they're going to try to drop on turn 1, and also gets rid of some key cards. Some of these Atarka Reds also run like Goblin Pile Driver, so Brutality is great versus that. And you can rip out a Stoke the Flames, you can rip out of the Atarka. Both of these are the key finishers of I mean, Stoke the Flames, of course, just can do a simple 4 damage to the face. Atarka's command often does 6, 7, 8 damage by giving creatures +1/+1, as well as doing the 3 damage. So ripping out an Atarka's command with the Collective Brutality is huge. And then it almost answers everything else. So not all versions run Smuggler's Copter. I particularly don't like the Smuggler's Copter. I don't think that you should necessarily... You should have some sideboard hate versus Smuggler's Copter for other decks I'm going to mention coming up. So, especially the Soul Artifact. You can bring in cards like Natural State, but I don't think it's worthwhile to bring it in. The next one, I have to figure the name of this is Destroy Target Red Attacking Red. Let's see, there it is. Surge of Righteousness. Surge of Righteousness, people forgot this card existed. It was a good answer back in the day to this deck. Surge of Righteousness can kill the Swift Spear or Abbots that are trying to go big, or just early. You get to take care of a card, like even a Zergu Bellstriker, for example, on turn 2, and gain 2 lives. So you've kind of negated the damage that it's done and destroyed it. So what this deck does really well against decks like Jeskai Black, where they're just going to Wild Slash or Fiery Impulse or even Lightning Strike off one of your early cards, you've made them use a spell and your card's already done some damage. So it's done what it wants to do. It's played that kind of what we call attrition war, and it's got its value. Surge of Righteousness completely negates that value. They do get a card for a card usually, and even if it's like a card for half of a card, for Dragon Fodder, you've negated that damage they've done early, and that's the difference between a lot of times stabilizing and not stabilizing. I like this deck, especially if you're into like Abzan midrange, or especially a lot of the white control, or even white midrange type strategies. If you're speaking of part 2 of this video, if you're looking to upgrade like the UI Flash, I think Surge of Righteousness is your go-to key card to put in the sideboard against this particular deck, because this deck can just run you over very, very quickly. Another one that I think that is worthwhile putting in this deck, especially if it just does go all out on the token route, is Brilliant Plague. And there is a lot of other token-based strategies right now, so I think it's just a matter of time before Secure the Waste gets picked up more in Frontier. But Brilliant Plague shuts down a whopping 9 cards of this particular deck in front of you. So the Goblin Rabble Masters, the Hordeling Outbursts, and the Dragon Fodders, which I would say are very, very key parts of this deck, are completely shut down. I've also seen people in the sideboard using like Arlen Cord for the sideboard in Atarka Red, and I've even seen other decks go all out on Goblin Rabble Masters and Hordeling Outbursts, so both of those being a 4 of in the deck. And you never know when there are a few other token-based cards. I don't think that I mean, like a PN Chrondolar, for example, this could also hit those cards that people are now and again putting in the deck. So Virulent Plague, I think, should, if you're in black, I love it in the sideboard. There still is a lot of like Crypt Breaker type strategies. There is like Waste Not. This of course just shuts down Waste Not. Shuts down a lot of other Sorin and Gideon type cards, or at least makes it miserable for them to try to get the value out of their tokens. So Virulent Plague, I think, is a very, very good answer to the Atarka Red. Another one which I'm surprised has not been picked up in Frontier is Weaver of Lightning. I really like this card because it dodges Lightning Strike. It's a 1/4 for 3 mana. It might be coming out too late, but it gives, talking about that early value where Fiery Impulse is just not a good answer versus Atarka, this is the perfect mitigator, I guess, of that. So you can, your late game Fiery Impulses and Wild Slash and Lightning Strike can actually kill 2 things with the Weaver of Lightning, and it's a 1/4 body, so it can safely block like Swift Spears and Abbots unless they pump even more into it, and if they do, then they have to use a lot of resources just getting through the Weaver. So I think Weaver is a great card to put in versus this matchup. And one other one I think from the latest Kaladesh is the Demon of the Dark Schemes. I think that this card is also 6 mana, so if you're into the Siege Rhino type decks, this is easily, after you stabilize, a way to just wipe the board. -2, -2 to all creatures, and then allows you to start recurring Siege Rhinos that your opponent may have destroyed. So I think that this card isn't that great right now in Standard, but I think it has a lot of potential in the Frontier format. So let me talk about what I think are a few riskier traps. The first one is Blessed Alliance. I'm not sure that I like Blessed Alliance in this particular matchup, because the gaining 4 life isn't going to do much. This isn't going to stabilize you against creatures. You're going to continue to attack. And if you make them to sacrifice an attacking creature, your best case is get rid of a Swift Spear. So I think it's a trap card to really bring in versus a Tarka Red. Another one is Feed the Clan. Feed the Clan and Pulse of Marasa, gaining 10 life and 6 life without destroying anything, I don't know is the right move. Of course, you have no other better things to bring in. They might be good things. Last card that I do think is dependent on how your opponent is building it. If they're more in the Goblins route, I don't know, but I think Dispel. Dispel is pretty good, and Negate in this against this deck, except that they do not hit the sorceries, but Dispel can hit both the Tarka's Command and Stoke the Flames, as well as become immense. So I think that it's worthwhile if you are running Dispels in your sideboard. I don't think you particularly put them in for this matchup, but if you do have them, they'd be great to bring in this matchup. So there's a Tarka Red. The next one we're going to talk about is going to be the Abzan aggro. So Abzan aggro is starting to get a lot more. I think it just won a face-to-face 4-round tournament. I'm not sure. There's a lot of ways to build Abzan. You can go more in the Planeswalkers. This is just kind of the basic list of it, where you go 1 drop is your Warden of the First Tree, and then 2nd drop is the Grim Flayer, and the Scrap Heap Scrounger. This artifact can help get the Grim Flayer online to get a 4/4. And then Tireless Tracker is good with fetch lands. Absent Charm is a permanent removal spell. And Anafen's is just great versus so many decks at the moment. And then onto the Siege Rhino or getting it 4. So it just tries to get to turn 4. And once you get to turn 4, your turn 4 is going to be doing much more than your opponent's turn 4. So the cards that I really like against Absent aggro is if you're in like a red-black aggro strategy, for example, it's target opponent sacrifices. It's a black, let's see if I can find this card here. Sorcery Speed. Maybe it's target player. Let me find the card for you. It's under Dragons of Tarkir. I know that it says target player sacrifices a green or white creature and loses 2 life. I think if you're an aggro deck, that's the perfect thing to keep up with this tempo, because you need to actually use removal that also does damage, just to try to get ahead of what the Siege Rhinos can get them back. So I think that's a perfect card to bring in. If someone just put it in the comment section, for some reason I can't figure out how to pull it up here on MTGO. Another one that I do like against this particular deck is some of these decks actually do run Hangerback Walker rather than Scrap Heap Scrounger, or some of both. And I think that, because Hangerback, of course, has great synergy at Jamoka's Command. So I think that a good card that is underutilized right now is Silk Wrap. The only thing that doesn't take care of in this particular deck is Siege Rhino. So Silk Wrap is an enchantment that is great versus the Ensoul. We'll talk about that. This says, enters the battlefield, you exile target creature with converted back cost 3 or less. This card by itself led to the extinction of Hangerback Walker in Standard. Hangerback Walker was everywhere. Everywhere was an understatement. It was like the smuggler's copter of its time. And then people started packing Silk Wraps in Jeskai Black and a few other places, and then it just completely became obsolete. People quit playing the card, and Hangerback Walker went from like a $20 card to almost nothing in just a short matter of weeks. And then they started getting picked up here and there, but this was the great answer, and it was also good because you could get rid of like Death Mist Raptors, Warden of the First Trees. In this case, Scrap Heap Scrounger, which keeps coming back in the deck, is incredibly annoying. And this just completely gets rid of it forever. So I like Silk Wrap in this matchup. Suppression Field is also okay because Suppression Field does affect most. So let's look at Suppression Field. Or not Suppression Field. It's called Suppression. I thought it was Suppression. Maybe the Toughness 4. What is that enchantment? Suspension Field. There we go. Suspension Field enters the battlefield with exile creature with toughness 3 or greater. So I like Suspension Field against some of these decks too, especially ones that aren't running like Scrap Heap Scrounger. But it'll hit Grim Flayer or Warden if they are active, and then hits Anafenza and also Siege Rhino. Hits a Tireless Tracker or Sylvan Advocate as well. So I do think the Suspension Field could kind of have the same slot as Silk Wrap. We'll have to wait and see which one ends up being better. But for decks that do like to kind of skip the 3 toughness cards, or the 2 toughness card and go right into 3, 4, and 5, this is a perfect answer for this particular deck. The best card I like, though, speaking of 4 toughness, is Valorous Stance. This is another card that actually had a pretty good price as an uncommon while it was in Standard. I think it maintained a $4 value. It was, or yeah, no, $3 value. No, maybe it only got up to 2. But I think this was really good back in Heroic because it gave you a target for Heroic and removal. But it was still pretty good. It was still in a lot of sideboards to take care of like Siege Rhinos or Anafenzas. If your opponent does get a Grim Flayer line, it can kill that. The Sylvan Advocate becomes a 4/5, it can kill that. So it can actually kill a variety of early. It was a great way to kill Courser of Crewfix, especially. Valor Stance will kill Weavers, so if you're in humans, it's going to be a good answer towards Weaver. And then on the other side of the coin for this, giving a creature indestructible is huge in this deck, so it can just completely shut down the Abzan Charm, or if they are running Ultimate Price or Murderous Cut, that's another way to counter it and still have another mode that is useful. Lastly, this is where I do like Blessed Alliance. Against this particular aggro deck, Tarka I don't like it, but this one I do like Blessed Alliance coming in, because it is most likely going to gain you 4 life and get rid of a very good attacking creature. So whether it be an Anafenza or a Siege Rhino, or if you've taken care of the early stuff, or even a Grimflayer Warden, taking care of them with a Blessed Alliance is very, very good. Because these cards this deck wants to get progressively bigger, and they're going to do that through their 1-drops and 2-drops becoming very valuable late game, and then really good early game as well. So those are the cards that I really, really like against this particular deck. Let's go on to the last, what I consider aggro deck, which is Ensoul Aggro. So I do love the Silk Wrap versus this deck, especially because it is the card that answers the Hangerback Walker, which a lot of Ensoul Aggros actually do use. But it takes care of the Scrap Heap Scrounger, it takes care of an Ornithopter that has been hooked up to an Ensoul Artifact. It'll even take care of their Chief Engineer if they are that route. So Silk Wrap is just a perfect answer to bring in versus this. I like Crackling Doom is usually, if you're running a Crackling Doom deck, you do just have it in the main, so I'm not going to talk about that mainly. But other cards that I like about this is Kolgan's Command. Kolgan's Command should be in every black-red deck, if not black-red sideboard. It will single-handedly keep the Smuggler's Copter in check, and I think it's really good against Hangerback Walker. I think that when people started using the Kolgan's Command, that was the nail in the coffin for Hangerback Walker. Silk Wrap hurt, Kolgan's Command completely just destroyed it. And Dromoka's Command also works versus this deck because you can fight off the early cards. Like if you have to kill Hangerback Walker early, that's fine. And then it can actually make your opponent sacrifice the Ensoul Artifact. So Dromoka's Command should always be, if you're in green-white, so you're an Abzan, that's a great addition to put in the sideboard for this particular deck. Another card that people forget about is Smash to Smithereens. So if you're in Atarka, for example, Smash to Smithereens is legal. It was printed in the M15 or was it it was in Origins. Origins the Smash to Smithereens. So doing 3 damage is perfect for the Atarka red, and destroying like an Ornithopter or Smuggler's Copter. It's an instant speed card, which is huge. A few other cards that people have forgot about. Natural State is still really good against this deck. Natural State kills a artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less. It can basically hit everything from the Chief of the Foundry to the Ensoul Artifact to the Ghostfire Blade. If they try to Ensoul an Ornithopter, you can kill the Ornithopter still. It's still a 0 converted mana cost. But people are always talking about, well, that doesn't help versus the Darksteel Citadel. Well, there's this card. If Darksteel Citadel becomes the worst... Or actually, Unravel's not in this one. Never mind. I was going to say Born of the God, but that was Born of the Gods. Do we have an Exile spell? I think that case, the Natural State is still good with killing the Ensoul Artifact. Silk Wrap can still take care of Darksteel Citadel. That's a shame. For some reason, I was thinking Unravel the Ether was Origins. Womp womp. Oh well. Natural State should still be good in this matchup. It does single-handedly take care of everything in this deck. So Natural State should be, if you're in green, packing in your sideboard for the Ensoul aggro. So let's kind of switch gears on to the control decks. Now the control decks are both, you have to go over here to the freeform. The first one that's very, very popular is what they call this multicolored control. So this particular one is using both the Jace Vryn's Prodigy and the Torrential Gearhulk. So they're really trying to control until they get one of these finishers out. So they're either going to finish it by Jace, and they are going to... I'm surprised this one doesn't have an Ojutai's Command, because it's usually pretty good for this particular deck to get Soulfire Grandmaster, because it's converted mana cost 2, right? Am I spelling it right? Ojutai's Command. Yeah, converted mana 2 or less to your graveyard of the battle. A lot of them do use these Ojutai's Command in their sideboard, and so I say running Tormod's Crypt is really, really good against Jeskai Black, because it kills that recursion of the Soulfire Grandmaster and the Jace when they start going to Ojutai's Command. So what this deck tries to do is it tries to early control with Fire Impulses, Lightning Strikes, Jaces, then it starts to control with Void Shatters, Kolaghan's Command, Crackling Dooms, even as this version has Unlicensed Disintegration. It runs basically a bunch of control cards of choice to try to get to the late game, and then Torrential Gearhulk, or just the pure value of Soulfire Grandmaster and Jace, will take it over. So the first card I really like is getting rid of their graveyard. So Tormod's Crypt's the best way right now. I'm hoping in the future we do get another little answer, especially for instances and sorceries for your opponent's graveyard. But for now, Tormod's Crypt, I think, if you just wait long enough, when they try to even flashback something, either Torrential Gearhulk or Jace, this is a good time, of course, to crack your Tormod's Crypt. Oh, he does have an Ojutai's Command right there, right in front of my face. Other ways that I think you should to interact with this deck is just to become more value-based in them. So this is where Collective Brutality, again, is very, very good versus this particular deck, because it can kill a Jace or Soulfire Grandmaster and then rip out a Dig Through Time or rip out an Ojutai's Command. And once you've done that on turn 2, you're in a great shape, because that just really screws up your opponent's plan of getting the tempo going, the value going through Jace or Soulfire early, and then you can worry about the threats later on. So I think Collective Brutality and even cards like Duress are very good against this deck. Another card, just Dispel. Dispel and Negate. Dispel takes care of almost everything in this deck because it's all instant speed. Ojutai's Command is instant speed. Crackling Doom, Unlicensed Disintegration, Kolaghan's Command, Lightning Strike, Fire Impulse. They are all dispellable, and Dispel is a perfect thing to side in your U-White Flash. You're upgrading that, or even some of your 4-color rally decks, and those. They're great ways, or any homebrews. Of course, on this deck or this channel, we're going to try to push the homebrews and the brewing your own decks rather than net decking. But anywho, keep those cards in mind. Kolaghan's Command is also very good against this deck. I like Kolaghan's Command because it can bring back a card from your graveyard and kill a Jace or a Soulfire Grandmaster. Later on, it can also kill the Torrential Gearhulk, so that's all of the threats that the Kolaghan's Command can take care of, and it never seems dead. Early, it's killing a Jace or a Soulfire Grandmaster and ripping out a card from their hand. Late, it's getting you back a threat that that your opponent has to answer once again. So I really like Kolaghan's Command if you're in black and red. And the card I really want to talk about, though, for all of you that are into white, is this gem. people are so focused on Rally the Ancestors that they forget Return to the Ranks actually exists in Frontier, as it's an M15 card. This card allows you to return cards with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield for whatever X is. So if you spend X for 3, you can return 3 back. This is a nightmare of a card for the Jeskai Black or the 4-color controls to deal with, because they're just trying to 1-for-1 in value. Late game, even in Abzan, if you're bringing back like a bunch of Grim Flayers and Sylvan Advocates and those type of cards, like say you're in that sort of route, or you're just in the good old Collected Company, Bant Collected Company, this is huge to bring back a bunch of those cards and then make it, you know, basically rinse and repeat. Especially if you've got like 10 protectors, you can get back Return of the Ranks later on and just keep doing it over and over and over. I guess 10 protector has to be flipped though. But so this is any sort of value-based card is exactly how you want to combat the multicolor control. And I think you can kind of make the same idea for like the Dragon Control. I think Dragon Control, you want to use a mix of things. I really like the Valor Stance versus Dragon Control. I think that's a perfect card for that particular matchup. All right, so on to our last one, our combo, how to kind of defeat combo. Combo is a little more tricky because you have to, Tormod's Crypt, of course, comes to mind. Exiling their graveyard is huge once they try to go off, especially. I mean, if you have a Tormod's Crypt, they have to try to figure out how to make you use it before they can really go off. So Tormod's Crypt can really blank this deck. It still is a pretty good value tempo-based deck that you can go like Satyr Wayfinder and Elvish Visionary, then can attack in. I've seen Smuggler's Copter be used in this particular deck just because it helps you dig through your deck to find what you need. But later on, though, you can still kind of do that tempo draw with Reflector Mage, Spell Queller, and then keep going, and then just keep attacking in and kind of controlling the board, and then Collected Company into more, and then just going like an Antuco Husk swinging for 8 damage, or 10 damage, or something like that. So even if you do shut down their combo, there is ways for these rally decks to really come back. I guess I should show the Rally Ancestors that's here. The best cards I like against this is the first one is Transgress the Mind. I think Transgress the Mind is perfect. It doesn't hit these cards, but these cards aren't really like the Zulpur Cutthroat is a little bit the winner, but if you do take care of one of their 3-drops in their hand, it means they're really gonna have to find another one. But taking out of a Spell Queller or Reflector Mage, or well, actually what you want to hit is either Spell Queller and Antuco Husk or Collected Company or Dig. Those are the ones you can hit. You can't hit Rally, but if you've taken care of a card that was meant to be played, that is huge. Another card, of course, is Collected Brutality. It kills off an early Zulport Cutthroat or Jace and then rips out a Rally or Dig or Collected Company. Hallowed Moonlight is huge versus this deck. Hallowed Moonlight exiles their cards when they try to go off. Works versus both the cards, the Collected Company and the Rally the Ancestors. And then Anafenza and Kalatos are the other cards. Anafenza exiling cards whenever they go to your graveyard from anywhere, and Kalatos they go to the graveyard from the battlefield. So I think that those are pretty much the... you could run cards like Incendiary Flow too, or Silk Wrap. Those are good for taking care of early Zulapors, but I don't know if they're that effective. But that's just some sideboard options for, I would say, the top 5 tier decks from Frontier. I hope that your local game store or your local scene is playing it, because we're having a lot of fun with it, seeing a lot of brews, seeing a lot of standard innovations and things like that, and so far I'm having a great time. Let me know what you see with your Frontier. What are the top 5 decks in your metagame in the comment section below. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.